Okay, we're live. Welcome, folks, to the Dev Shop Marketing Briefing. My guest today is Josh Doody. Josh has some experience I don't have. I've launched a digital product, I guess more than one technically, but Josh has got more experience under his belt in that regard. I think he's learned a few more things, both the easy and hard way, perhaps. We'll find out. And so yeah, he's going to share what he's learned about creating a digital product. The title of this presentation is Your First Digital Product. And maybe this will be relevant to folks who already have a digital product or don't and are just thinking about launching one. But regardless, I think you're really going to benefit from hearing what Josh says. And then afterwards, hopefully, asking him just every question under the sun so that you can learn from what he's learned, hopefully bypass some of the tougher lessons that anyone who's ever created a digital product will, unless they're selling you a course on how to create digital products, will probably tell you it's not easy. It is substantially not easier than services, I would say. So there's, I think, a lot to be gained from hearing what Josh has said. I know Josh has presented at MicroConf at least once and just really has a ton of relevant experience in this area. So that's why I wanted him to present. He was gracious enough to say yes. And I've just taken a quick look at his presentation and it looks awesome. I'm looking forward to essentially seeing it for the first time too, along with you. So just a few quick procedural notes. If a question pops into your mind, we will not interrupt Josh while he's presenting. We'll just hold those questions until afterwards. It should be a roughly 30-minute presentation, which leaves almost an hour for Q&A afterwards. This is a 90-minute call if we need it. And so drop your questions into the chat or jot them down. And then during the Q&A section, you can unmute yourself at, kind of raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask your question directly to Josh, have some back and forth, ask follow-up questions, whatever you like. It's all fine. This is a small group. We're all in the same room in order to create that kind of intimate experience where we can just, have discussion and talk back and forth. So with that, Josh, I will turn it over to you. I am going to mute my video so folks aren't distracted with me taking notes, and looking forward to hearing what you have to say, man.
Great, thanks, Philip. I think if it's okay, I'm going to mute my video too and just share my screen. Does that work?
That works just fine. That works.
I'm afraid that my peanut brain won't be able to multitask and keep track of a video camera.
It really can be distracting.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to stop my video too and then share my screen. And then once I'm finished with my presentation, which should be 20 to 30 minutes depending, we'll jump back in and start tackling some Q&A.
Awesome.
Okay, so you should be able to see my screen now, where I'm sharing a keynote presentation. Look good?
Yep. Great.
All right, so like Philip said, I'm talking about a pretty simple topic today, your first digital product, which kind of in hindsight, as I was putting this together, I realized I wasn't sure what my first digital product was until I really thought about it. And I probably would have not described the first one that you'll see as it. But before I tell you about sort of my product journey, and then we talk about what your first digital product should look like, let me tell you a little about myself. I'm Josh Doody. That's my Twitter handle, @JoshDoody. That's the quickest way to get in touch with me in kind of real time. And I like to kind of chat on Twitter. It's one of my favorite watering holes. That's my picture on the left. And then on the right is my book, Fearless Salary Negotiation. So that's my current focus in terms of digital products and even business building. The product started as just a book, basically a Kindle book, and then now has become courses and coaching and a lot of different things around salary negotiation. But my focus is on salary negotiation. And that's the business that I'm running today. But before Fearless Salary Negotiation, I built a number of digital products. And so I thought maybe the best way to give you an idea of where you should focus for your first digital products was to take you kind of on my digital product journey and take an unusual tack here, which is to kind of tell you what the product was and then why it didn't work and why it shouldn't have been my first digital product. And then I have an example in here of what I think a great first digital product would have been for me and what something like your first digital product would look like. So let's start with my journey. And my first digital product was called ShareAppeal. I built this in 2011. As you can see, it's some nice hand-rolled CSS and HTML. I built this on Ruby on Rails, and this was the first time that I learned to build a Ruby on Rails web app, sort of flexing the computer engineering muscle that I gained in undergrad a number of years earlier. So as I said, this is a Ruby on Rails app. It peaked at about 60 registered users. And what it is an app for sharing links with friends. So I found, and actually still kind of find this need isn't quite fulfilled, that I often would read articles and find something I thought would be useful for somebody, and I would want to share it with them. But the ways that you share links with people are kind of weird. Maybe you tweet at them, or you drop it on their Facebook wall, or you email them. And those are all pretty ephemeral. All of those things that I described are things that are, in real time sort of flowing by. And so I thought, what if there's a way for me to capture a link that I'd like to share with somebody and drop it on their reading list, so that whenever they happen to have some leisure time and they wanted to read an article, they could go look at their list and say, oh, well, here's something that Josh gave me to read. I'll check it out. He probably knows me well enough that this is not a waste of my time to look at. And I would do the same thing for myself. You could save links and things like that. So it was basically a scratch your own itch kind of thing. But it never worked as a product. So when I launched this, I thought I was going to build a social network, and I had a sort of a 3-stage business plan in mind, and really thought that I was building something real here, which is the eternal optimist in me. But as I got into it, I realized that there were some significant problems with it. One of them was the product was just too complicated to be a first digital product. And so it took me a very long time to build a lot of the features that ShareAppeal had. I was relying on a lot of external services like Twitter, and some other APIs or interfaces with different apps to sort of make it go. And so each one of those added a significant layer of complexity in terms of testing and implementation that I just wasn't equipped to handle, building my first web app. The business model was too complicated. I mentioned it was 3 layers, 3 sort of phases. And so I would need to roll this business model out over a number of years to make it work, which may work for an experienced business owner and entrepreneur, but wasn't necessarily a good fit for me as somebody who was just trying to build a first product. Also, I didn't know how to do marketing or anything like that. And then the last thing was that I built this in a total vacuum. So as I was building this product, I wasn't getting feedback other than from a close friend or two, who your close friends are usually just going to tell you how great it is and how cool it is that you're building something, because they don't necessarily understand what you're building. So I was building something in a vacuum that didn't get a lot of feedback. I didn't have any marketing. So basically I just bit off way more than I could chew here. And so I worked on this for about 1.5 years. And then realized I saw the writing on the wall and sort of just shut it down in terms of my development time. Once I realized that the business model wasn't going to work. In fact, Facebook dabbled in a piece of the business model that I was hoping to springboard off of myself. And Facebook had a really hard time using it, which was sort of peer-to-peer selling, or buying of physical goods and other goods. I realize that doesn't make a lot of sense in the context of this app, but that was one of my kind of end games, was sharing physical things with people. So buying somebody a cupcake on their birthday or something like that. So I just realized that there were some significant problems that I bit off more than I can chew. I shut it down and I said, I'm going to start looking for a different idea. So I built TaskBook, which was my second digital app, my second digital product. This was a SaaS, a software as a service. My goal was to charge monthly or annually. I wanted to target a more specific audience, which was small business owners. And it's a checklist app for small businesses. So I thought, there's a need there. I happen to know some entrepreneurs who had started a small business. They needed help managing their retail store. And so I worked with them as a pilot customer. So I did real customer research in real time as I built this app, to get their feedback and their input and watch their users use it in real time. And so a lot of ways, this was a much more streamlined app. It did not rely on a lot of external services and APIs. It was pretty self-contained. I owned all of it and didn't have to rely on external communications with things. And I was also able to physically go into business stores where they were using it and help them to adopt it and get their feedback and watch them use it in real time. So I did some more things right here, but there were also some significant problems with it. One, it's still way too complicated. It's a SaaS app. There's a lot of engineering stuff under the hood here that Even in hindsight, I can't believe that I even attempted to build it, much less accomplished it. For example, there's a kiosk mode where multiple people could share a workstation by just tapping in a 4-digit PIN, and it was secure. There was auditing on the checklists, so that if you changed the checklist this week, you could look at 6 months ago, it's the same version of the checklist to see what was happening with it then. All this crazy reporting, just a ton of stuff that was way too heavy. And again, I didn't do any marketing or understand it. I was still more or less building in a vacuum with 1 or 2 pilot customers instead of 0. And I happened to choose a really tough market. So a little bit of market research ahead would have been much better on this if I had understood that the particular businesses that I was targeting are typically solo business owners and practitioners, and the budget for this sort of thing would come basically out of their pocket. So they would be choosing between paying the light bill at home or paying for my SaaS, which is just not a great position to put people in and isn't a winning marketing formula. It's a challenging market to sell to. So the good news was I streamlined, I went with something simpler, I had fewer dependencies. The bad news is I still tried to build a full-on web application that was a full stack application. I actually did get paying customers for this, but because of my inability to market, I had a really hard time turning it into any kind of serious revenue. So around the same time that I built TaskBook, I had started writing Heads Up Tournament Poker, which is a book that I wrote with a couple of friends of mine, Annie and Vanessa. This is a book that you can still buy today on Amazon. It's a much smaller project in terms of dependencies, in terms of the technology required to make it go. It was not a digital product per se, maybe not in the way that folks on this call might think of digital products, but it was sold almost exclusively on Amazon. And so from my perspective, it looks a lot like an Amazon product. There is a Kindle version. The way that we built it looked a whole lot like a collaboration on a digital product would today with courses, with my co-authors recording a lot of audio and then me kind of working the audio into something that was readable on the page and things like that. But the good news was that I had about a 6-month cycle from when I started writing the manuscript on this until when I was ready to ship it. And it was about 10 months from the time that that happened until it was fully edited and ready to release. And then we kind of sat on it for about 6 months. So I really narrowed down the scope. I'm just writing a book. I'm taking audio from my co-authors. I'm molding it into something that you can read on the page. And then I'm going to send it over to the publisher to be edited and distributed. And so that was some of the smarter things that I was doing here was, okay, well, I need to do something smarter or smaller. I need to bite off a little bit more or a little bit less so that I can chew it all. But there were some issues with this one too. One was it was just kind of bad timing. If you're looking at this and you're thinking, wasn't there a poker boom that went away? And that's me. I wrote this book kind of at the peak of the poker boom. And then also I traditionally published it, which meant the good news is I was a published author. The bad news was that I didn't get a whole lot of money from it. And all of the marketing again fell to me. So I didn't realize that working with a traditional publisher didn't mean that they would market. They don't market in general unless you're a superstar author. And so we still had the same problem. We still have a good product. I'm very proud of the work, but we didn't have a marketing machine. We didn't have any real way to get customers or to get it out there other than just sort of hustling ourselves. So this was better. This was easier. It took a lot less time. I made a little bit of money on it. I got a good finished product, and I had the experience of actually writing a book, which, as you have seen from the beginning of the presentation, that's kind of the direction that I went. So the next digital product, you'll notice a theme here. So we went from ShareAppeal, which was a huge Ruby on Rails web application that had a bunch of moving parts and had a bunch of external dependencies, to TaskBook, which was a smaller, more streamlined web application, to a book, which is a physical book and also a Kindle book. And then the next one was called Mastering Business Email. So by the time I published Mastering Business Email, I realized I actually needed to publish something very, very small. And I just wanted to get experience self-publishing a book. So I said, I'm not going to do full packages of stuff. I'm not going to do applications. I'm going to write a 12,000 word book, which is, I don't know, 50 pages or 75 pages or something like that. I'm going to get it on the page. And I'm just going to go through the whole process of self-publishing this thing as a digital product only. There's no paperback version of this. I'm going to put it on Amazon. I'm going to sell it on my own site. And I'm going to see how it goes. So this was great because it gave me an opportunity to work on a much smaller project. It was also purely digital. And so now I'm moving into the digital only world of things that are small bites that I can chew. And I use this as a trial balloon to kind of get experience with the whole self-publishing process, which would come in handy when Fearless Salary Negotiation came out later. So the bad things here, I chose a boring subject. In fact, one reason that I published Mastering Business Email was that it was a chapter that I pulled from Fearless Salary Negotiation as I wrote that manuscript. So this is essentially sawdust that I repackaged. I wasn't terrible at marketing by this time, but I still wasn't very good. So sort of a mediocre marketing effort. I did sell some copies. It launched okay, but I still didn't quite understand that if you build it, they will come is just not accurate most of the time. And of course, I was also already working on Fearless Salary Negotiation as I wrote Mastering Business Email and as I kind of cut it out and self-published it. So that distracted me from Fearless Salary Negotiation and also sort of guaranteed that I wasn't ever going to give Mastering Business Email the kind of attention it deserved. So this is a book, again, that I published. People still buy it. I think it's a good book. It teaches people a useful skill, but it's definitely not something that a whole lot of people are sort of clamoring to learn about. Okay. So now we get to Fearless Salary Negotiation. So I've gone from a really big web application with all kinds of external dependencies to a single book that I self-published totally independently, that I totally owned. And this is where I actually finally published something that worked. I'd worked on a marketing plan before I launched this. I had a lot of my friends who were influencers promote it on the day that it launched on Amazon. And then I sort of slowly built up infrastructure around it and video courses and all that good stuff to build it into an actual business. This is the thing that now I'm kind of known for as the salary negotiation guy. I was building an audience as I wrote it, which was good. So as I mentioned, I'm kind of getting better at marketing. I narrowed the topic based on the research that I was doing and the feedback I was getting as I built it. So this is one of the benefits to building a public, is that I could send a free chapter to my email list and see who responded. And some chapters people just didn't care about. And so those topics often didn't even make it into the book because I could tell it wasn't going to help sell copies. I also talked to other published authors and smart people about their publishing strategies so that I could do this right. And eventually launched Fearless Salary Negotiation to be #1 in 2 categories on Amazon when it launched, which is for an independent self-published author is essentially a success, and it continues to sell pretty well. I sell somewhere between 50 and 100 copies a month on Amazon, and then some number of copies that seems to vary a lot on my own website. And if you'll notice, again, this is just a small little project that has been growing and growing, and I'm building a business around it. Today, I would say that my weak spots are still a little bit of marketing. So I've gotten pretty good at driving traffic to my website. I've gotten pretty good at gathering people onto my email list so I can communicate with them. But I'm still not as great about outbound marketing, for example, or getting opportunities to be in different kinds of media outlets and that sort of thing. And also focusing is hard. So once you have sort of your seed of a digital product, it can be challenging to focus on the right things at the right time as a bootstrapper and figuring out, where do I go next with this? How do I get more sales? How do I get more customers? What's the next product I need to add next to this? So that's my product journey. And I hope what you'll take from that is that small is the answer for your first digital product. And certainly if I could do it again, I would not start by trying to build web applications. That was a good learning experience, but it wasn't very profitable. It was a huge time spend. I spent a few years on web applications that never made any meaningful amount of money. Whereas when I finally just hunkered down and spent about 8 months writing a really good book and getting feedback as I went, I managed to build a business around it that I've been running full-time for a couple of years now. Okay, so that's my journey, but that's enough about me. You're here because you want to know what your first digital product should look like, and more importantly, I think, sort of how to start. So some of you may have an idea, you may not have an idea, but I want to give you some things that you can think about that will help you to get started on your journey creating a digital product. So the first thing I would say is that you should survey or Safari. So I started by building ShareAppeal in a vacuum. TaskBook was more or less built in a vacuum. So I wasn't getting feedback about what I should build. I was building what I wanted to build. Sometimes people do get lucky and they build something they want to build that they should have built, and it works really well. I know a number of people who have done this with courses and digital products, especially in the software developer sort of market, where they have a problem and they decide that they want to really attack this problem and get really good at solving it. They do that, they teach other people how to do it, and they make a bunch of money. But that's pretty rare. Usually what will happen is you'll scratch your own itch, and it will turn out that other people just aren't that interested in having that itch scratched. So how do you find an idea? You survey or Safari. So these are my 2 recommendations for how to do this. So on the left, if you already have an audience, you've already got a mailing list of 500 or 1,000 or 5,000 people. You've got people who know who you are, who are paying attention to you, who will communicate with you. I recommend surveying them. So I was just telling Philip before we started the call that I just am surveying my list right now and just kind of asking them an open-ended question. The survey that I sent them, I basically stole from this book, Ask, by Ryan Levesque. So I recommend, if you have an audience already, even if it's just a big Twitter following. By big, I would say at least 1,000 people, but I'd like to say 5,000 or more these days with the kind of lower engagement on Twitter. You can start by just surveying those people. And essentially what you're trying to find out is, what are the problems that they're having right now that are sort of in your wheelhouse? And which of those problems do you think that you can provide a solution for? So that's a good way to find an idea for a digital product. If you don't have an audience yet, I think the best place to start is doing a safari, which is a term, sales safari is a term that I first heard from Amy Hoy and Alex Hillman with their business, which is now called Stacking the Bricks. So stackingthebricks.com is their new site that they just launched, I think, a week or two ago. Just tons and tons and tons of great stuff about how to do research, how to find watering holes in the internet where people are talking about their problems, or they're discussing things that they're interested in certain areas. These are places like forums and Reddit and Twitter and all kinds of places where you can just kind of eavesdrop on people and see what they're saying and find out what they're complaining about, what problems they're having, so that you can start getting ideas about, well, can I help solve that problem? And so you want to go either survey your audience, see what they have to say, or learn how to do a sales safari, how to safari and look for where people are talking about problems and just listen to them. Listen to what they had to say, what they tell you in your survey, what they're talking about in those watering holes, and also listen carefully to what people are saying to you personally. So it turns out that I wrote a book on salary negotiation, which I have a 10-year career in performance management and talent development, and I consulted with companies on how they manage their compensation structures and pay people. It never occurred to me that I would eventually build a product that leveraged that knowledge. But what kind of tipped me to really start thinking about it and writing about it, and ultimately to write a book on the topic of salary negotiation, was a lot of people would ask me for help when they were negotiating salary or thinking about a career change or having trouble getting that promotion at work. And so a light bulb eventually went on, and I said, wait a minute, people ask me about this all the time. I've done it successfully myself. It seems like something that isn't written a lot about, but that people are very interested in. And there's a straight line between, if I can help somebody negotiate a higher salary, that gets them more money, which will of course incentivize them to buy a product from me or multiple products or coaching from me. So a lot of what I built with Fearless Salary Negotiation was just built on my own experience of having listened to people, answered their questions, and then a light bulb went on. And I said, well, if they're asking me about this, I'll bet there are a lot more people who have similar questions. And if I can answer my friends' questions, my family's questions, I can answer strangers' questions too. And then Fearless Salary Negotiation was born. So survey your existing list, do a sales safari, go do research and listen and eavesdrop on people if you don't have a list yet, and look for ideas and problems that can be solved, and start thinking about solutions to those problems. Also start small. So I've talked about this a number of times, and I hope that it's sinking in. We tend to have big ideas, right? And so we see things that are just, Elon Musk is taking over the electric car market, or, trying to send a rocket ship to Mars. And we try and think of that next idea. But even Elon started pretty small. He started with smaller products and smaller businesses. He didn't start with Tesla. And so I started with ShareAppeal, which is way too big. So I should have gone smaller. And so hopefully now you're thinking, okay, well, I had this big idea. What's a small thing that I can peel off of that idea into something smaller? And then you should do that again and say, no, smaller still. So I went from ShareAppeal to TaskBook. That was a step down in terms of size, but it wasn't a big enough step down. I realized it later. I had too many dependencies in ShareAppeal. I had fewer in TaskBook, but I was still building a very big application that required full-time engineering effort on my part, plus customer development, plus marketing, support, all of these things that I had to do to run this business. It's just way too much for a first digital product, especially when there's so many facets of building a business and entrepreneurship that you might have to learn along the way as you develop your first project. And then you go smaller still. So I then finally found books, and I wrote a book. I wrote the Heads Up Tournament Poker book, and then I self-published Mastering Business Email, and eventually published Fearless Salary Negotiation. And so a book is a much smaller thing that you can sink your teeth into. You can probably write a book, if you're a writer, in 6 months to a year. You can crank out a manuscript, whereas it could take literally years to build like a web application or something like that. But I think actually, as I look back, I don't know if I would even encourage you to go as big as a book. I think you can go smaller. And I actually did this late last year with a product called the Interview Cheat Sheet, which is a 2-page PDF. You can see little sort of sneaky screenshots there at the bottom. It's just a 2-page PDF that's printable. And that allows people to quickly prep for an interview by doing basic company research and asking the right questions in their interviews and avoiding some pitfalls around salary negotiation mistakes that people can make. And it has checklists for how to prep for an in-person interview or a phone call interview. And I actually launched this on Product Hunt and to my mailing list. I didn't sell a ton of interview cheat sheets, but I sold enough to say, you know what, I actually created something that people wanted. And it did pretty well considering that I put it together in, I think, 5 or 6 days, and it took me another day or two to create the marketing and launch it. And so the interview cheat sheet is something that I would point to as a really good type of first digital product. It was, you can see that I had it designed. It's not a beautiful design. I didn't do this myself. I think I got it done on Fiverr for like 15 bucks for the PDFs. But I had all the content. I had already done all the research. And so I just said, well, what if I distill this into a little 2-page PDF? I launched it at $14 or launched it at $14, discounted to $9. Sold quite a few of them on Product Hunt into my mailing list, eventually raised the price to $14. And then later on, a few months ago, I actually turned this into a lead magnet. And it's a very good lead magnet that people like a lot. And so it started as a digital product that I made a little bit of money on, and then I turned it into a way to grow my audience so that I could survey them later on. So if you take anything away from everything I've said so far, it's go really small. Your first digital product should be small. It should be something you have expertise in. It should be something that people have asked you about or that you've seen people talking about. And then the last thing that I'd like to say on that is, on the small things side, is don't be fooled into thinking that small means will never be big. And so even if I'd started with the interview cheat sheet, I've now built Fearless Salary Negotiation into a book and courses. I do one-on-one coaching. I'm starting to work with coding boot camps and dev schools and that sort of thing. And so I'm taking that idea and saying, how can I get it in front of as many people as possible, even though it started as a book, or could have even started as small as just the interview cheat sheet, which is a nice little product. And back to ShareAppeal from earlier. So let's say that, just like I said with a book even, and if I had maybe started with something like the interview cheat sheet instead of a full book on salary negotiation, I said, here's a tool to help you get ready for your interviews. Let's think about ShareAppeal for a minute. Basically what ShareAppeal was a way for curating links that your friends thought were interesting so that you could have access to those links, or vice versa. So it's a link curation service that people do research, and then you say, I would like Rick to read this article, so I'll just share the link with Rick. And then lots of friends are doing that for each other. But to do that, that's a simple idea, but I built an entire web application to do it, which was overkill, big time overkill. So let me show you another product that I've already mentioned called Product Hunt. Product Hunt actually started as a thing that Ryan built using off-the-shelf software that was essentially a way for people to curate links and put them into a big list. And then certain people who curated them would have their links emailed out in a daily digest each day. So Product Hunt literally began as a little tool where people would submit links once a day. The tool would aggregate those links into an email and send the email off to people, which is really similar to what I was kind of trying to do with ShareAppeal. Only the difference is that Ryan built the MVP for Product Hunt in about 20 minutes using off-the-shelf stuff and got instant validation, because I think he said he had like 150 people who signed up in the first week to get these curated links from people who were reading interesting stuff and doing research on interesting stuff and had interesting things to say. So it's the same concept, but Ryan was much smarter with the way that he started it. I think because he already had experience with sort of thinking through product ideas. And he started with something really, really small, a curated list of links that got emailed every day. And it was essentially the same thing as ShareAppeal. And I could have saved probably 15 or 16 months if I had started the same way and realized that ShareAppeal wasn't going to grow. Whereas Ryan actually built Product Hunt into a really big business that continues to grow and is recently acquired and all that good stuff. So start small and then realize that you can grow that small thing into a bigger thing once you get validation. But if you spend 15 months getting validation on something, or ignoring validation on something and just building in the dark, you may have a really hard time getting traction with it, and you could have just wasted a bunch of time. So start small and then grow it out instead of starting big and then hoping you find a market for it. And then the last sort of topic here is that you should build in public. So I mentioned this earlier where I was talking about surveying and safaring, but you want to be building an audience as you create this thing. So you've either surveyed your audience and found that they're interested in the topic that you're going to build a small first product for, or you've been doing research at different watering holes, doing a safari to see what people are talking about, what they're complaining about, what pain points they have, so that you can build a solution. As you build the solution, you should be telling people that you're building the solution. And so I'll give you a few small things that you may have heard before, but if you haven't, this will be, I think, a good kind of primer on how do you get out there and start building in public so that you can get feedback as you go. And if you have heard this before, hopefully it will sort of reiterate it to you so that you say, okay, fine, I'll do that, instead of just building this thing quietly behind the scenes without getting any input. So the first thing you should do is build a landing page. There are tons and tons of places that you can get landing page templates these days. So I think literally if you just Google landing page template, if you're on WordPress, there are tons of services that you can buy or themes that you can buy that have a basic landing page. And all you need on a landing page is the idea of your product. It doesn't even have to have a name yet, but just a question that you're asking somebody that they might want to solve, or just telling them, hey, I'm writing a book on this topic, or I'm building a course on this topic, or I'm going to create a cheat sheet on this topic, or a checklist on this topic. So just a landing page that you can point people to, so that when you go to them and say, hey, I see that you're talking about in this forum, I see you're talking about this problem that you have, I'm actually going to build a solution to it. You can learn more about the solution that I'm building and opt into my email list on this landing page. So you need the landing page, not necessarily, but it helps to have a landing page to build an email list. So you can point people there, say, this will tell you a little bit more about the solution that I have in mind. And if you'd like me to continue keeping you updated as I build the solution, you can opt in to my mailing list. And then once you start building that email list, as you build the thing that you're going to eventually try to sell as your first digital product, you can provide weekly email updates to the people that are on that list. And that is not only just giving them updates and telling them what you're up to, but asking for feedback from them as you go. So when I wrote Fearless Salary Negotiation, the first chapter that I wrote was essentially what turned into Mastering Business Email. I think I called the chapter something like How to Impress Your Boss with Awesome Email or something like that. And I sent it out, and my friends and family kind of were interested, but I could not get people to sign up to download that chapter for free. And so that was a pretty big signal to me that I'm not quite writing about the thing that people are interested in. So I need to do more research, and I need to understand what their pain points really are. And so with an email list, you can find that out. You can send out the free thing, tell them you're writing a chapter on topic X, tell them you're going to create a video course on topic X, or whatever it is that you're working on, and just see how they respond, see if they're interested. And you'll notice that some weeks people are really interested and they hit reply and they say, this is great, I've been looking for that. Or you'll hear crickets and nobody will be interested. And that'll give you a signal that maybe that's not the direction to go as you build this thing that you're building. So that can be sort of a bummer, but at the same time, you'll get feedback as you go so that you're not wasting your time 6 months, 8 months, a year, building something behind the scenes in a vacuum without getting feedback, and then finding that same bad news out later on after you've already invested all that time. And then, of course, like I said, the weekly updates also keep people engaged so that once you're ready to launch the thing that you're building and you've gotten feedback as you went along and you continue to point new people in that direction, then you'll have some people to actually sell the product to when you launch, which is a big part of the success of Fearless Salary Negotiation that didn't happen with most of my products before that. Was I spent a year building an email list before I launched it. And so I was able to communicate with those people, get them to tell their friends, and turn it into a successful Amazon launch. So as I wrap up here, key takeaways, the key things that I think you should take away as you think about building your first digital product. The first thing is that you should start by doing a survey or safari. So either ask your existing audience what it is that you can help them with, or do a sales safari like Amy and Alex recommend at stackingthebricks.com, and go visit places on the internet where people are talking about topics that you're interested in and knowledgeable about, and see what it is that they need help with, so that the initial ideas that you have are useful ideas that may resonate with people. Then start small. And as you saw, I recommend going smaller and smaller and smaller. And so you get to something that just seems so small. I really think the interview cheat sheet is sort of a prototype for a very small little product that you can launch that will get you validation on an idea, might get you a little bit of revenue, will help you to build an audience, and will help you to go start to finish through the process of building a digital product and launching it and shipping it and getting someone to pay you money for it. That whole process is a learning process. You don't want to waste a really big idea on you trying to figure out how to market something or sell something or package it or ship it. So if you can go through that process with a really small product really quickly and iterate, you'll get more experience quicker, you'll make your mistakes on a smaller product, and that'll allow you to start with a bigger product next time. And then build it in public. So the more that you're working on these things, make sure that you're building an email list, that you're getting feedback from people as you build it, that you're showing it to people real time as you build it, so that you can see what resonates with people and what doesn't. And that way you can take the survey information or the Safari information that you got, the small product that you're working on, and get feedback as you iterate. And hopefully when you launch that first small product, it will resonate with the people that you're building it for, because they've been telling you what they want the whole time and giving that feedback as you went. So those are my 3 key takeaways. Make sure you do your research, start small, and build in public as you go. And hopefully your first digital product will be a successful launch that will teach you a lot, but will also maybe generate some revenue and start to build an audience so that your next digital product, which could be a little bit bigger, might have more success. Okay, so if you want to talk about products, I mentioned my Twitter handle is @JoshDoody. So reach out anytime on Twitter. That's a really great way to get in touch with me. Also, I mentioned the interview cheat sheet. You can get it for free at fearlessSalaryNegotiation.com. That's my book website /DSMB. And so I figured if you go there, you can download that. You can see what the cheat sheet looks like and see, it really is very small, a little 2-page PDF. Also, there are some links to other things like Stacking the Bricks and the TaskBook that you can look at. And I think the original launch page for Product Hunt is linked to as well. So just sort of a little recap of my talk there at fearlesssalarynegotiation.com/DSMB. And holler at me on Twitter if you have questions as you build your product, or if you are wanting to validate an idea, maybe you can bounce some ideas off of me. Thanks a lot. I think, Philip, I will stop sharing my screen now, and then you and I can do some Q&A.
Josh, that was great. I love that you're presenting a framework that I think is relevant to different situations, not just do it this way and it'll work. Because we all know those recipes usually turn out different when they're cooked in a different kitchen than the one they were created in.
Yeah, I've seen, I kind of alluded earlier, sometimes people do just sort of like build something quietly and then they just hit a home run. I won't name names, but I'm in a community with somebody who had like a $500,000 product launch that seems sort of surprising. And so you kind of ask him, like, how did you do that? Where did your traffic come from? And his answer is like, well, I don't know. I mean, I announced it on Twitter, and so I'm really happy for him. That's amazing for him, but I can't take a lot away. I can't replicate that on my own. So you just have to kind of take what are the small things that you can do to build something and give yourself the best chance at getting feedback and having a successful product that people care about and will pay money for.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like my experience with digital products has been more on the unicorn side of things, not in terms of revenue. Like I was just looking at revenue, and my digital product revenue, probably would not be impressive. I'll share it. I don't think anybody's going to be blown away, but I recently was doing some analysis of my customer list. Look at my other display here. If you count pure product sales and then leveraged time sales, which is like you mentioned, coaching and related services that connect to the digital product. And I think that's I want to talk about that a little bit more with you, because I think that's a big part of the picture of the kind of revenue that a digital product enables. That, yeah, you can do coaching without a book, but the book can be the most impressive business card for someone who wants to do coaching, which can be done in a group format. So you're leveraging your time and getting a much better hourly rate than you might one-on-one. Mm-hmm. If you count all that, I'm at $148,399 in revenue since January of 2015, which is when I sold my first copy of the positioning manual. So that's about a little over $5,000 a month. So I just say that to point out that like even a dummy like me can do it. But I didn't have nearly as disciplined a process about product development as you did, and I'd love to dig more into that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that even that revenue number is, it's so funny because I just mentioned, a $500,000 product launch that somebody did. But the truth is that I would guess somewhere between 80 and 90% of digital products may never even break the $1,000 number if they choose the wrong thing. I mean, in my case, I think I've had 2 out of 5 or 6. Right. And so, that's kind of what I'm thinking is, I think it sounds like you've actually kind of followed a good process. And so you don't have millions of dollars in digital product sales, but you do have 6 figures, low 6 figures, which is, I think a lot of people will really like that. That's a good number. And I think following a simple process and saying, I'm just going to build this book and I'm going to do these things that I know my audience wants. It's a low variance, sort of high reward, long-term way to do it.
Well, let's do this. I've got some questions that I wrote down while you were talking. I'll start since I have the bully pulpit here, and I hope other folks will have questions too, but maybe just drop those into the chat as I'm interrogating Josh, and then we'll get to audience questions in a bit. ShareAppeal, were you full-time on that when you were working on that, or how did that fit into your life? Did you quit your job and work on that, or what?
No, I wasn't I never went full-time on anything until just before I actually published Fearless Salary Negotiation. Okay. I started ShareAppeal as a full-time because I was unemployed when I started it. I kind of stepped away from my career. But I started work on ShareAppeal in October and started a day job in January. So I had enough time to build the prototype. Basically, the MVP was launched as a full-time endeavor. And then I worked on it for another year as a moonlight project. Same for TaskBook. TaskBook was exclusively, I was a full-time employee when I built TaskBook. And when I wrote Fearless Salary Negotiations manuscript, I was full-time.
Cool. Let's dig into that a little bit. There's two things that are interesting, I think. How did you do, I guess, the risk assessment of Josh is going to quit his job and double down on fearless salary negotiation? How did you do that? And then when you were working a full-time job, how did you make the side thing coexist with that?
Yeah. So I'll take those in order. So I'm single. I live in Gainesville, Florida, and I don't have any kids or family.
Can I ask how old you are? As I get older, it seems relevant.
I'm 37.
Okay. And
so when I quit my day job to work on fearless salary negotiation full time, I was 35.
Uh-huh.
Before that, there are a lot of steps. This is a topic I like to talk about. Maybe I won't go super deep here, but I had gotten paid down debt almost entirely. The only thing I had left was a mortgage, and then I had saved up most of my income for about almost a year and a half to build a runway.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that through a combination of, I guess, a version of luck, where, like I said, I'm single, no kids, so I don't have dependents who need my income, but also just through being frugal. I still live in the same house that I bought 2 years ago. My income had doubled since I bought that house, and I had not upgraded or bought a new car or anything like that. So I kept expenses way down and kept my head down and just saved, I think, 60 to 70% of my take-home pay every month for about a year and a half after I paid down most of my debt. So a lot of it is, I recognize that is not necessarily replicable. But that is how I got to a point where I realized if I wanted to publish Fearless Salary Negotiation and do it right and actually try to build a business around it and give myself a shot at a full-time income that lasted for a long time, that I was going to have to quit my day job and go full-time on it, at least for the time being. And so that's how I got there. Before that, though, I was building things on the side, like you mentioned. And so that was just nights and weekends, starting with ShareAppeal. I started building that and writing the Heads Up Tournament poker book shortly after I finished my MBA in 2011. And so essentially what I had done with the MBA was I conditioned myself to work every weekend on MBA stuff to finish that degree. And so rather than taking that time back and just playing basketball all weekend or doing whatever on the weekends, going to the beach, I said, well, I'm just going to swap that time for learning how to build products and then eventually to build businesses. And so I would work full-time, nights to some extent, but mostly I would just work all the way through the weekend. And I did that for a number of years. And that was the same routine I followed to build ShareAppeal and to build TaskBook and then Mastering Business Email, Fearless Salary Negotiation. And I actually finished the manuscript and pretty much had the edited Fearless Salary Negotiation manuscript finished before I quit my full-time job in 2015, doing nights and weekends. So again, that's a luxury that I had because I didn't have dependents who, I could just go home and work for a couple hours at night, or I could spend all weekend working. But I took advantage of that opportunity. Mm-hmm. That's how I built those things.
Did you ever sneak in any time at work?
Occasionally.
Okay.
That's another. I was very fortunate that at least one of the jobs that I had was a job that I was good at it. I did my job well. They paid me well, but it simply did not require 100% of my attention, even when I was at my desk doing my job. And so occasionally I could mess around with research or, write a paragraph here or there on something I was working on.
Yeah, I had a few system administrator jobs like that.
Yeah. Mine were client facing, so it was a little bit trickier. There was less sort of time that I could do that. But that was a luxury that I had too, was I happened to be in everywhere.
Okay.
My brain cycles.
Let's dig into the research end of things. Uh-huh. What have you learned about market research? How would you recommend doing market research for, let's make it specific. Let's say people are going to resist their impulses and listen to your advice and start small. Mm-hmm. Like walk me through the process. Like, I guess you have an idea. You think you want to write a book about, I don't know, some JavaScript framework or mm-hmm. some design approach or something like that. What would you do to do the market research?
Well, I mean, the first place I would start really is, you mentioned JavaScript or something. Like, I would start doing research on something that I found either is something that's a pain point that I have that I just don't know enough about, or that other people have asked me about, or I've seen people asking about. So I think sometimes you can just sort of like blue sky an idea and then it will hit. But I think most of the time, if you have to blue sky something, that's not a good sign. You would hope to have organically heard or been asked about the topic that you're researching.
Okay, chicken and an egg problem there. If you have no audience, no
Yeah,
one's going to approach you, right? Or I mean, if
that's
they
right.
are, it's going to be like kind of a one-off, right? So,
Which I think is fine. I think,
okay.
friends and family. So that was a lot of like the salary negotiation stuff that I did early was literally like a friend would call me and be like, "Hey, I just got this job offer and something doesn't feel right. Can you talk me through it?" I would just kind of be like, I mean, okay, you know, um,
So within your like personal and professional network, you were perceived as an expert by a few people, or
even a few
enough of an
people.
expert that they would ask for help. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's I don't think it's necessary or sufficient, but I do think that it's a good sign if there's something that you realize like people ask me about this a lot.
Hmm.
And a lot could be once a month or even once every 6 months, right? Depending on
Okay.
what the topic is. But it's
Okay.
something that people come to you and they say, "Hey, can I ask you about this?" And it happens often, uh,
Hmm.
right? But also you can do that research. So if you don't have an audience, that's where I go to the kind of stacking the bricks side of things, which is
Hmm.
where I say, all right, well, you probably have things that you're interested in. And I definitely recommend anytime you're trying to build a first of anything, start with something you're interested in. So ShareAppeal was not a business success, but it was a personal success because it was something that I was really interested in
Hmm.
that I don't think I would have invested the time and energy in ShareAppeal and actually built a working web application that I'm pretty sure is out there now and you can still go sign up for it and we'll work for you. Right. And it worked well. It never crashed, no problems. But I don't think I could have put in the effort to build an application that complicated and
Uh-huh.
intense if I wasn't interested in the thing that I was building it for. Like I genuinely wanted to build reading lists of links for my friends, which I mean, that tells you a lot about who I am. The original name that I wanted to call it was Mavenly, maven.ly, because of the term Maven from Malcolm Gladwell's book. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it pre-existed, but that's what I had in mind, right? Is like, I want a community of mavens who can share information with each other easily so that they can all get through it. If I hadn't been interested in, I don't think I could have built it. So if you're doing research at watering holes, like I mentioned, the sales safari technique, which again, I can't tell you enough about stackingthebricks.com, Amy Hoy and Alex Hillman. They help people build businesses. They know what they're doing. But their recommendation is just go into an area where you already have some, you've already dipped a toe in the water, you get the topic, and just go read forums and see what people are complaining about, see what people are asking about, see what people are struggling with, and start looking for things that I think resonate with you. So you'll see some problems. I mentioned this to you earlier, I think before we started recording, that I'm surveying my list. Some of the things my list says they would like help with are things that I just kind of go, oh, gee whiz, I don't know anything about that, and I don't think I can help. Some things they mention, I go, oh yeah, I haven't written about that, but that's something I do know about, and I can help with that. You're looking for the same kind of thing where somebody's complaining about a problem that you have, and maybe you already solved that problem for yourself 6 months ago, or you just have some really big ideas around how you could solve that problem and what they're facing and helping them understand it, right? So I think it's as basic as that, as you're just looking for what people are talking about. Their process is a lot more intense, where you're literally copy and pasting text from forums, you're categorizing stuff, you're doing word clouds, you're looking for common topics, and you're starting to narrow it down to like certain pain points that people have and that they would pay to have solved. So I think that you can start a lot more generally than that, though.
Yeah, there's a subjective aspect to it of like it needs to light you up a little bit, right?
I think so.
The word passion is a word I try to avoid using in any context because it's just so misused by evil HR people to manipulate young impressionable people into overworking is one use I see for it. But it sounds like that's not optional to have some kind of like it lights you up a little bit.
At least a little bit, right? And the reason is just that, well, a couple of things. One is, if you build a product for an audience that you don't care about in terms of, and I don't mean care, like, I don't mean that as sort of negatively as it sounds, but if you're not like interested in what that audience is interested in, you're going to have a really hard time. Even if you build a successful product, now you built a successful product for people that you don't care to interact with. And you're going to have to support that product, and you're going to have to provide updates, and you're going to have to answer their questions about the product and help them solve problems. And that's not going to be fun for you. So I think that it's important to find something, I don't know if you have to be quote unquote passionate about it, but you have to be at least kind of interested in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is something I didn't talk much about, but with TaskBook, this was kind of a problem that I ran into. Is I mentioned marketing. I got to the point where I needed to start doing real content marketing to get traffic to the site, to get signups and drop them into that sort of SaaS funnel. And what I found was anytime I went to write content for that audience, I just couldn't do it. I just didn't care about writing content to help small retail shops manage their businesses better. I just didn't care. And
Didn't light you up, did it?
even though my friends were people who were running a bakery that I helped them build an app for, I couldn't get excited about writing content that would help them do that better. That's a bad sign. And I wish I had figured it out before I started building TaskBook. So you have to be interested somewhat.
Yeah, I think what Amy and Alex have done really well is try to help people temper the subjective part, which is, okay, I'm fired up about link sharing, or I'm really fired up about some app that helps you, get a massage therapist to your home on demand or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they help you temper that with something more objective, which is, can you find evidence online that people care about this, or that it's a real problem, or people are complaining about it publicly when you're not asking them if it's a problem, and they're trying to make you feel good by giving you the answers they want or that you want.
I can give you kind of a good example of this actually that just occurred to me, which was early on, before I published Fearless Salary Negotiation. I was trying to build that audience, and I was doing research, and a friend of mine named Justin Abrams sent me a link to a question on Quora, and it was a question about interview mistakes that people make or something. And so he was like, yeah, I think you might want to check this out. Like, this is a good question that people seem to be interested in. And I noticed there's a lot of other stuff. And so I kind of went to Quora and started poking around and realized, man, people are asking a lot of questions about interviewing and salary negotiation. And a lot of the stuff that I ended up writing in my book, and then later, really a lot of the longer form articles I've written on my site are in sort of reaction to stuff I found on Quora. And I just found for my topic that Quora was a great watering hole where people were asking a lot of questions. And there were some topics where I would write an answer and just get thousands and thousands of views right away because they were so interested in it, right? And so I think, it's important to kind of find that place where you can do that research. And that was validating for me to say, well, if I'm able to get this much traction just on Quora, then that's a good sign that I'm onto a topic that people really care about. And I don't mind writing these answers, right? So I wasn't going in there. It wasn't a chore for me to write answers on Quora. If anything, the hard part was stopping myself at 1 hour on an answer instead of spending half a morning on it, right?
Yeah.
And I continue to be kind of just as energized today about salary negotiation as I was, 2 years ago when I started writing about it.
I'm going to pull a question from Hal here. How many positive replies should you have before moving forward with a first digital product? I think that relates to exactly what we're talking about now.
Yeah, so obviously I can't give a number on that, but I will say, and I'm just spitballing here, that number can be a lot smaller if you're building a much smaller digital product. And that's why I like small digital products, right? So if you're trying to build a competitor for Facebook, the answer is millions of people need to tell you that they want a competitor for Facebook and that they're going to pay for it or they're going to advertise on it or whatever it is, right? Because competing with Facebook is going to cost you a lot of money and a lot of time, and you're not going to build a prototype in a week. Whereas if you want to build the interview cheat sheet, I mean, you literally need like 4 people to tell you like, yeah, I could use it. I had an interview last week and wasn't sure what to say when they asked me this question. It would have been nice to have some kind of tool to help me with that. I'm like, great, I'm going to build a $9 PDF. Do you want it? And if you get a few yeses on that, then build it, because it's going to take you 4 days to build it and ship it, right? Or a week or whatever. So I think the answer is that it's directly proportional to how big the thing is you're trying to build. So the smaller it is, the thing you're trying to build, then the fewer sort of interested parties you need before you just try and ship that thing.
Okay. So you kind of scale it to the size of the effort that it would take to create it and market it. That's something I want to dig into is when you did ShareAppeal and TaskBook and were you aware what a grave error you were making by not having a plan for marketing?
No, not at all. I built ShareAppeal. And this is, I think, very common, and hopefully we're beating this drum enough that people here understand that this is not the case today. But I thought that if I just built something that was really cool, that, magical internet fairies would sprinkle dust on it and it would grow or something. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's just not how it works. I mean, nobody found it. Eventually, I can't remember where, but I got somebody retweeted a link or something, and I got like 30 signups in a day, which is half of the people that ever signed up for ShareAppeal. But the bottom line is, I built this thing. My friends knew about it. They were using it. I mean, the screenshot I had before, that was, somebody really used it. People actively used it, but there were like 10 of them actively using it, right? Yeah. And maybe I could have built something bigger, but I had no idea that I should have been marketing. I should have been doing content marketing, probably for something like that. I should have been doing outreach to blogs and, maybe, I don't know, creating some kind of a little link that they could embed in their blog to, save this to your ShareAppeal reading list or something. You know what I mean? I had no idea. TaskBook, I started TaskBook without that knowledge, and then later started realizing that I had to do that, and then I started doing a little bit of marketing. And And that's when I ran into that content marketing wall where I was like, I don't want to write articles about this stuff. So I had no idea how big the error that I was making was. I mean, I had it totally backwards. And it took me 3 solid months of full-time work to build the MVP for ShareAppeal. It took me about 6 months working part-time to build the MVP for TaskBook. And that was like really, really working hard on the side. And I would have been much better off surveying people for 6 months and talking to people and getting people to tell me what they needed and doing that research than building an app.
That research is really unrewarding, though. It doesn't give you that dopamine hit the way that
Nope.
Jumping into a code editor and roughing out a prototype over a caffeine-fueled weekend does.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, and I think that's why people don't do the research, right? I think we find creative ways to explain away the reason that we're not doing that research so that we can get that dopamine rush. But again, I would say that's a good reason to do something small, because you do get that dopamine rush, right? Like if it's something small and you can crank it out in a day, then you can spend 5 days doing research on it, get some validation that's interesting, spend 2 days building the thing, ship it. And then now in a full week, you've gone through that whole cycle. You've done the research, you've gotten that little dopamine hit, and you've shipped something, as opposed to dragging it out where you spend 12 months developing something that you ship and then it bombs.
Yeah, and maybe gotten your first few sales, which, I mean, it's weird. The dopamine hit from those, like waking up in the morning, turning on your phone and seeing, oh, you sold a book last night. I can attest is real, but hedonistic adaptation is also real. And you get used to that.
Yeah.
Let me pull in another question from Hal, since we're talking about building stuff quickly. You mentioned some off-the-shelf tools that, what's his name, used to build Product Hunt. Do you know any more about that? Can you kind of talk about that more?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't have like a great answer for it. So I would say one of them is Google Apps, just your email address or whatever they call it, G Suite now or something. That's like $5 a month, and it gives you the ability to use Google Drive and share documents and collaborate and stuff, and access to Google Forms, which is I actually use Google Forms for the survey I just sent to my mailing list. So it sounds, I think I saw the other day somebody did a survey of like I think it was Farhad Manju, who's the NYT columnist, tech columnist, but he was like surveying people on like what companies' digital products can't you live without, right? And so it was stuff like Facebook. But a big one that I had totally forgotten was even a product that I pay for every month is G Suite, Google Apps. But it's got the ability to collaborate. It's got email built in. You can do forms. You can survey people. So I think that's something that, for $5 a month or something like that, you can survey. Other stuff. So I don't have anything prepped for this. Drip is the email marketing program that I think you use and that I definitely use. And I think they have a free plan that goes up to like 100 people for free or something.
Yep.
And so I think that would be a great place to, you could even start building a list and get 50 people on it and start getting feedback from them. And if you decide that you're not going to build that thing, you could just nuke that list and stay under 100 and never pay for it. So that's something I think is good. And Drip is the kind of thing that you can grow into if you build something that's bigger. I don't know. Do you have ideas on this? I'm sure there are really good answers. And if I just had 5 minutes to prepare, I would actually give somebody useful information here.
No, I can check off, put Josh in the hot seat for my list for this.
We did that.
I'm guessing with Product Hunt, was that maybe just like a static website made with Dreamweaver before it was a fully dynamic web app, or is that perhaps how that was rapidly prototyped and validated?
He used something off the shelf, and I thought I had it in my notes, and maybe I didn't.
Okay, so maybe he used some other SaaS that he built that on top of. It would kind of like be creating a social network on one of those social network builders, like I forget the name of it. There's one that starts with the letter N, that kind of thing, instead of investing all this engineering effort into developing your own back end. Okay.
It was called Link something. Let me see. It was off the shelf, and it was like it was a community where you could share things in the community, and then would aggregate and send out.
Interesting. Okay, so all he was doing was taking that and giving it a sort of job to do that was core to his idea, and then when that was validated, he went off and built some custom version of that.
It was called Linky Dink. I just found it.
Linky Dink.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
There's a link. I don't even know. I'm going to click this and see if it's even a live link anymore. Oh, I don't know where it goes. Here's the link that was in the article that oh, that's not going to help at all. Well, never mind.
Okay. So the core idea is like maybe built on top of something off the shelf during that validation phase.
Yeah. Yeah. So just, he just threw something together and took the basic idea. I mean, his basic idea was to get a curated list of links of cool stuff that people were finding. That was his idea. And that's still what Product Hunt is, by the way. So he used this thing called Linky Dink, which I think it was like some kind of a community where you could share links with each other. And then it would spit out an email every day that had a curated list of the links that people had shared or found. Of certain people in the community had that sort of power to contribute to that list every day. And that's all he did for like the first, I don't know how many weeks.
Yeah, I remember an episode of the Freelancer Show a ways back where it was unanimous among myself and the other panelists that if you think your digital, we were just talking specifically about books, and we were like, if you have some reason that Sendowl or DPD or Gumroad or one of the other literally of dozens of other options out there won't work for you for checkout and you have to develop your own, you are procrastinating.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Yeah. For sure.
Let's talk, actually, let me bring in a question from Neville. He's in the process of developing his first digital product 2 to 3 weeks before he releases. And Neville, if you could chime in and say, is this software or something static like a book? Because I think it'll affect Josh's answer. Do you have any recommendations on fulfillment, delivery of the product, copy protection? That really does sound, well, I mean, it could be downloaded software that you're talking about, or it could be a book. So if you can clarify that.
Am I unmuted here?
Hey, no, we can hear you.
Fine at last. No, the products are digital products in the form of PDFs.
Okay.
And there will be supporting products like audios and voiceover presentations, stuff like that.
Great. So more on the sort of information product end of things.
Correct, yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. Josh, what do you think? Fulfillment and copy protection, how would you think about that, or what would you do?
Yeah, so I'll zoom out a little bit. First of all, you just ripped off, a list of maybe the top 4 or 5 platforms that I would suggest. I use Sendowl, and I'm very happy with it for delivering my digital products, which are a book in a few different formats, including PDF, some different worksheets and other PDFs, and also some video files. So it works pretty well there. I will say, kind of zooming out one level, the copy protection thing is interesting to me. My philosophy on this was informed quite a bit by Nathan Barry in his book Authority. And that is that I don't pay the slightest bit of attention to copy protection. So that may not work for everybody, but for me, it's just sort of not worth the energy that would be required to prevent people from getting it and distributing it or stealing it or whatever they want to do. And so I just don't invest any effort there. So I don't focus a lot on DRM or digital protection for the stuff that I offer on Sendowl or in general. And I'm okay with that. If it's something that's really important, I think Sendowl, I think Gumroad, they do offer ways to license things. But I think at the end of the day, what you'll find is you're going to have a really hard time finding a really foolproof way to prevent somebody from sharing digital files with somebody else if they really want to. And the question is, how much energy do you want to invest in that effort?
I'll add to that I know for a fact Sendowl and DPD, maybe even actually Gumroad too, I think, do have facilities for adding a digital watermark to PDFs, which is a nice balance of, it's not like, and actually those can also do, a lot of those can do, they can take the PDF that you upload and then password protect it or prevent people from copy pasting out of it, aside from doing things like screenshots. So those are all kind of like getting just enough friction in the process where someone sharing it is going to be disincentivized, I think, to upload it to BitTorrent or what have you.
Yeah, just to comment back on that, I've been a software developer most of my life, and I know that stuff's going to get hacked. So somewhere it's going to appear on the internet free of charge and all the copyright broken. So I'm probably not too concerned with that. I do want to make it, just discourage people to put at least a little bit of a barrier in there. So it was interesting to hear the same kind of sentiment from both of you guys. The fulfillment, over the next however many years, I'm one of your proverbial baby boomers here, Josh. Over the next few years, I'm going to develop, maybe 10, 20 of these products. And it would be nice if I could have a web page where a subscriber could go back and see the library of stuff that he's purchased from me or downloaded from me over the last number of years, because I know that you download something, especially free stuff, you sort of lose it after a while, and then a year later you want to go back to it and you can't find the file, and then you have to go hunting for it.
So I think Gumroad does that pretty well. I have to say, and I don't like saying this out loud, but I can't recommend Gumroad totally, fully, hardly, or what I can't use English right now. But Gumroad does exactly what you're describing. However, I moved off of Gumroad at the beginning of the year to Sendow because it felt to me like the Gumroad platform itself was, I don't want to say unstable, but maybe uncertain in its future.
Shaky was the word I was going to throw in there.
Yeah, it was a little shaky. So Gumroad is exactly what you described. Unfortunately, I don't recommend people getting on Gumroad because I don't know how long it's going to be around. Sendow doesn't really do that. There's another platform that's similar. Sendow gives you links that you can sort of let people download forever. I don't know, Philip, do you know of any platforms? Does DPD, I think you use DPD, right?
DPD is more transactional. It's less able to, when I say less able, probably, any of these could maybe be, with a little bit of supplementary software, could probably be made to do what you want, Neville. But just in terms of how it comes out of the box, DPD's also not got great options. What you're describing is more a characteristic of something, a membership site. Hal just linked to this article about the many wonders, which I think Josh is going to change his tune on in about 6 to 12 months, but the many wonders of this platform called With Coach, which is getting a lot of buzz because it's a nice value proposition of low price and lots of functionality, and it could be great. So there's something will be out there, but I have not had, because my product offering is very thin compared to what you're talking about. I just haven't had the need for what you're describing. Mm-hmm. But I guarantee you something's out there. This is a product category that it's got to have at least 30 decent options, if not 50, I would suspect.
Sure. Yeah. And I've come across things like Gumroad before, but getting the insight from you guys is what makes this kind of call just so incredibly valuable, because then I don't have to go through the pain of finding out that Gumroad's out of business in 6 months. Thank
you. And it depends on your scale, but it can be painful to.
Oh yeah. It's I'm very small scale, and it took me. Philip, you and I talked through it when I was choosing between DPD and Sendow in December. It took me a good month to figure out which one to move on to and actually migrate.
They're both great options, actually. Yeah.
I would also say, like, my stance on not focusing on DRM and kind of not caring. Once you buy it from me, you get a download link, and you kind of do what you want with that download link. That sort of mitigates the issue of making sure that people have, access to it in perpetuity, right? So I agree, it would be nice if there was some master place that people could go and download the things that they bought for me. But I also am not doing anything that would prevent them from just moving it over to their new computer when they get it, or dropping it in a folder and, transferring it indefinitely from machine to machine, or on a flash drive, or on a backup, or whatever. So I think there could be times in the future when someone wants to get access to a product they bought for me and they cannot find it, then they can just email me and I'll send it to them. But you don't find that as a common problem? I know. I'm racking my brain trying to think of when's the last time somebody emailed me and said, "Hey, I bought something from you and I can't download it or find it," and I don't think it's ever happened.
I'm going to say maybe I've gotten 6 to 10 such emails since January of 2015. It's very small.
Yeah, that's great, guys. Thank you.
Sure.
Great question. Let me switch over to Graham's question. I've got more, but I want to prioritize audience questions. Graham says, any advice on evolving a product continuum? So having something like a book be the core of a larger ecosystem of products and services.
So Philip, you have to know this is a softball for me. Because that's how I built Fearless Salary Negotiation. When it launched, it initially launched as I think I launched the paperback and the Kindle at the same time on Amazon, but that's all it was. And then early in 2016, I started to build the video courses, and that was a very intense process that took I don't know, a couple of months or so, 3 months. And then since then, I built another course called Get Your Next Raise, which is specifically focused on a particular aspect of the book. I built the interview cheat sheet. And then I've also now, I'm working with code schools and code boot camps to try and find a way to augment their career development programs and things like that. And so I think this is where the start small mantra can really pay off, because I think our inclination is to blue sky things from the beginning and to say, I would like to build a product suite that has these 8 attributes and these different things. And then you start building that, and it takes a long time to build that stuff, especially, in my case, I had written a book, but I had never laid out a paperback. So I had to learn how to do that just to launch on Amazon, right? So if I had decided I'm going to launch video courses and coaching and everything in December of 2015, I don't know if I ever would have launched anything. So I think that it's better to say, what's a little bite-sized chunk that I can take, and I'll ship that, and then I'll add this other thing. And the nice thing is that once you ship the first little chunk, then you can start surveying or getting feedback from people and see what's the next chunk that I should build, not what's the next chunk that I want to build. I think you can definitely do it. And Philip, you've done this as well. I mean, you have a book on positioning, you do mentoring on positioning, and a number of things that you do that are positioning focused, but you didn't launch all of that sort of at once, right? Like, if anything, you started with none of it and you sort of built little things out over time.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's different valid philosophies on this. There's more than one valid philosophy. Like I always call this the Philip's wife method. Start with the thing you want to do the least. Do that first, which for most people is going to be the market research. And that happens to be, I think, the most productive pattern when it comes to research. But then once you have some validation, you start to have that momentum, like people are buying your product. You're like I keep a running list. I don't have it written down anywhere, but the sort of mental list of things that I was doing when I sold a book, or when the notification popped up on my phone a moments later after I sold the book. It's stuff like, actually, I sold a book while I was at the emergency room with my dog the other day. Anyway, that starts happening. That's like a distinct phase where you're like, oh my God, people are buying this thing and my marketing is working. And it feels like momentum, because I think that's a good way to describe it. And I think that's where it starts to get a little tricky to make those decisions about what to do next, because some things you could do could diminish that momentum, either in terms of your personal feeling of like, this is going in the right direction. I think you can make decisions that are the wrong decision, where you're like, well, crap, I just wasted 6 months on something that didn't get this flywheel moving faster or contribute mass to it so it's more stable across seasonal variations. Like, that's the thing that I was not expecting with book sales. You just want it to be this hockey stick up and to the right, but April was a terrible month for book sales for me.
Me too.
I think a couple of my friends have been like, yeah, April was kind of a weak month for sales. Anyway, so I don't have a great answer for that, because once you have that momentum, it's not like you become arrogant, but you have this feeling of confidence, which can really just send you off a cliff. Not to over dramatize it. I think you can recover from most mistakes that you make at that point once you have that momentum. But at the same time, it can make you think, again, not that you're invincible, but you're like, well, let's just do it all. Mm-hmm. And I think the best framework is just maybe not the Philip's wife approach. Sorry, Cheryl, she's not here to defend herself, but more just like, okay, what's the next more ambitious thing? Not what's the most ambitious thing, but what's the next step, gradual step up.
Yeah, I think building, adding a small thing. So that's kind of what I did with what I work on, right? And the coaching in particular it was like a third of my income in 2016, and didn't occur to me that I would do paid coaching at the beginning of 2016. But it's something I added because I had video courses, I had some authority, I had a book that was out there, and I thought, I've been helping people as I wrote the book. I had coached people, but I didn't think I would charge for it, So I think it's important to say, what do I have? What's the smallest thing I can start with? And then what can I add to that to augment it? And that's the key, is to augment it and do it for good reason, right? Like some Some topics don't need video courses, right? And sometimes we can fall victim to overkill. When I first launched my video courses, I probably cost myself 2 or 3 weeks of launch time because I wanted to launch on Teachable. And I built out this really robust, teachable framework for delivering my video courses and with action items for each lesson and all this stuff. And nobody cared about that stuff. Since then, I pared it back, and you just download a zip file and it's got everything you need, and you can just watch it on your own computer, and everybody's fine with that. So we can kind of blue sky and get these big ideas, and then we spend a lot of energy to develop and ship those ideas.
I did not know when I did it, but the ratio of engineering time to cash flow for group mentoring was an awesome ratio for me. Mm-hmm. Like, it literally took me a few hours to put together a sales page and email my list and say, I have this thing. I've been asked to, put together a mentoring program. Here it is. Here's what it looks like. Here's a buy button. I mean, it literally, I'm pretty sure it maybe took 2 afternoons to put all that together, 2 mm-hmm. half days. And it immediately started generating cash, whereas the engineering time of producing the positioning course, which I'm still figuring out how to sell, it doesn't sell well compared to my book. Mm-hmm. It's a higher ticket item, and the engineering cost was substantial. Mm-hmm. So that has not been a favorable ROI yet. I hope that it will, but yeah. How else would you suggest coaching as a thing for consultants? As a digital product? I call it leverage time when it's a group thing, like I do with my Positioning Accelerator program. And I love it. Not everybody loves it. Not everybody loves coaching or teaching or having to listen to other people talk about their problems or what's not working in their business. I love that stuff. So it's a natural fit for me. And if it's the same for you, it's not like necessarily the first thing you would do, because it's so much easier to do if you have an audience and a list and people who are already paying attention to you. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I agree with that.
How did that fit in for you?
I started coaching later. I was talking to my buddy a couple of weeks ago about this, and we're talking about, I don't know if you would call it a pivot, but a refocus for my business from, when the business began with Fearless Salary Negotiation, all I had was a book and, a career behind the book, but I had a book to sell. And then, over the past, like I said, last year, 1/3 of my income was from coaching. And then this year, I think I haven't actually done the math recently, but I think it's more than 1/3 from coaching. And so I find that really I need to be positioning myself, which, a little bit about that topic, as a professional salary negotiation coach who also has a book. If you want to do it yourself, you can buy my book. And so my friend James was saying, you need to switch your focus so that you're positioning yourself as a salary negotiation coach and expert. And also, if you don't want to work with Josh or can't afford to work with Josh, or it's not the right time to work with Josh, you can buy his book and video courses and things like that to learn how to do it yourself on your own time. But I couldn't, he made a good point that he said, I'm not saying that you've made a mistake with the way you position your business. I'm saying that you have to adapt to the new information and the new experience that you have. 6 months ago, I didn't, now I can claim I've negotiated with people who were working with Google and Microsoft and Amazon and Tesla and all these companies. That wasn't true a year ago. So I couldn't have gone out and charged what I charge now for coaching a year ago, because all I had was that book. I didn't have that experience. Now I have the experience, so I can go back and say, well, maybe I need to refocus on the coaching because I like doing that and because it's a little bit more predictable and all that stuff. And so I think coaching is something that you do not because coaching is a good idea, but because you have expertise to share. You have some sort of way of conveying the value of the coaching that you deliver. So for me, this is another area where, like I said, for a year, I just coached friends and family for free, or friends of friends, right? They'd say, hey, I heard about salary negotiation. I said, sure, hop on the call. Then we went through the process, and I refined, literally developed the process that I wrote about in my book, and then that I use now, doing free coaching sessions for people and making them a lot of money and not getting paid for it. But then once I had that under my belt, and I can confidently say to somebody, with the job offer that you got from that company, I can help you get a lot more money. You should pay me to help you, and we'll work together and we'll get you a better outcome. Then I could actually start coaching in a professional capacity. So I think as a consultant, if you have expertise that you can convey and that you can use to demonstrate that spending money on your time and expertise is wise for somebody who would be coached by you, then I think that it's something you should certainly consider if you'd like doing that kind of thing, like you said.
Yeah, I would agree and add to that. One of the things I started doing was I would see patterns in the questions people would email me, and the people would email me these questions because they read the book or heard me on a podcast or whatever. And I started seeing patterns to those, and I started to develop a process by which I could, coaching is maybe not the right word for it, but basically email coaching people, where I would say, okay, here's step one, do this. Go to the NAICS drill down table and, give me a list of market verticals that are intriguing to you. That's step one. Now, email me when you're done with that. And then step two. And it's sort of turned into, the backbone is maybe overselling it, but a big part of how I do coaching when people pay me.
Mm-hmm.
So I just tried some stuff out where the expectation was lower than if someone was paying me. It was like, hey, I'm just emailing this guy to see what he says. And if I get back to people, they're overjoyed. So the expectations were very low. It was kind of a low stakes situation, but I used it as a way to try some ideas out. And when those were productive, I incorporated them into the coaching that I was doing. Let's wrap up with a little 5-minute lightning round of questions.
All right.
With a book, there's this feeling like, who am I to write a book? Is there some threshold of experience or credibility where you think people should not write a book if they're below that threshold, or do you think about it in that way?
Gosh, I don't think of it in that way, but I would say, so the poker book was sort of a unique circumstance where I had a lot of experience playing poker, but also happened to know professional poker players who even knew more than I did, and I could contribute in ways that they couldn't, all that kind of stuff. So I had like a unique set of skills. But for a topic, I would say the threshold is pretty low in that if it's a topic that isn't already, really overwhelmed in that market with things, which salary negotiation is a good example of that. There just isn't. If you go to Amazon and search salary negotiation, you find my book and you can see a few other books, but it's clear that it's not a topic that people have written a lot about. I think the threshold is, are you willing to do research that other people haven't done? And, can you come up with unique material? So I don't think you have to be an expert on it. I don't think you have to be in the industry for 10 years. I think a lot of times it's just a matter of, are you willing to do research and write about what you learn? And in fact, I don't talk about this earlier in my little presentation, but that's a good way to get started is don't even start with a book, start with a blog or something, right? There's absolutely nothing wrong with just finding a topic that you're interested in, doing research, writing good blog posts and seeing what catches, what people are interested in, what people share on Twitter, what people post on Reddit, right? And then taking those topics and distilling that down into your book that you write. So I think the threshold is pretty low. If you're willing to do research that other people aren't willing to do, then that's pretty good.
Love that. I'll partially answer my own question by saying Nathan Barry's book Authority has this wonderful idea that beginners are sometimes, or people who are just beyond that beginner level are sometimes great teachers because they can relate to what it's like to be a beginner.
Yep.
Were you afraid to bounce around between topics or be thought of as like, who is this guy? Like, he wrote a book on poker, now he's talking about salary negotiation. Did that worry you at all?
No, not really. It's funny because people don't know that I wrote a book on poker. Most people don't, right? So I've kind of carved out a niche as the salary negotiation guy. And I think, there's another sort of evolution that could easily happen. I don't know what it would be, but where I would move away from salary negotiation and focus on a different topic. So a good example that I like to point to here is, I don't know if you know who Gary Vaynerchuk is, aka Gary V. So when I found Gary, he was the wine guy, right? He owned this thing called Wine Library, and he did winelibrary.tv, which was like a YouTube show about wine tasting. And that's how I got introduced to him through all my friends. If you look at him now, you have to work pretty hard to figure out that he used to be the wine guy, because he's now sort of a social media marketing guru who runs an agency. That's a digital social media marketing agency, or a digital media marketing agency, and all this stuff. So Gary built an entire career and an entire brand as quote unquote the wine guy. And then over a couple of years kind of went dark and built a whole different business and came back as the digital social media agency guy. And he's completely respected and has a much larger career now than he would have then in terms of footprint. So I just don't think, I mentioned Elon Musk earlier. I mean, Elon, was, I think, one of the founders of PayPal, and now he's the SpaceX and Tesla guy. I think that's a change that you just kind of make, right? Like if you get interested in something, you kind of set it aside. Nathan Barry, you mentioned Nathan Barry. He was the guy who wrote Authority. He also wrote a book on designing web applications and some other stuff. Now he's the guy who runs ConvertKit, right? Rob Walling, Drip, started out with, selling beach towels online, and then invoicing software. And then,
oh, really? I had no idea.
Yeah, he
cool.
did a bunch of little, he had HitTail, his first SaaS, was he kind of like leveled up. And now he's the guy who has Drip and then was purchased by Lead Pages, right? So I just think you can psych yourself out. There's no reason to. If you're interested in it, build a product, ship it, and then think about what your next move is. And maybe it doesn't have anything to do with your current product, and I think that's fine.
Yeah, that's true. Michael Port's another one who kind of had a first act around this book Yourself Solid, and now a second act around working as a paid public speaker. So you do see examples, and you're right. I think it's like the sawdust from building business number one that then often becomes the foundation for business number two.
Mm-hmm.
How do you listen effectively when you're doing market research?
I take a lot of notes. So I wasn't doing it today, but I use Evernote. And so if you go into Evernote, I have, 5 or 6 different notebooks called Fearless Salary Negotiation - something. And so one of them is coaching, and one of them is consulting, and one of them is the book, and one of them is video courses. And so, anytime that I'm having, after we wrap up here, I have a call with a coaching prospect, and I'm going to take notes. And a lot of those notes are because I'm hoping to close a coaching prospect. And a lot of those notes are so that I can do kind of word cloud kind of stuff, and I can see what they're asking me about. So that's the biggest thing I do is I just take a lot of notes because I know I'll forget. And I put them in a place where I can search them later, so that I don't lose them.
Cool.
I'm also just naturally curious, so I think that helps a lot. Like when I'm talking to somebody, most of the time I'm genuinely curious about what they're saying, and I think that is just a kind of a natural advantage that I have, is that I just want to know what people are up to and what they're thinking.
Yeah. Can I ask 2 more questions and then we'll wrap up?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure.
How would you talk, Josh, of, I don't know, when did you build ShareAppeal? Was that like 5 years ago, roughly?
6 years ago, almost 6 years ago.
So how would you talk to Josh of 6 years ago into doing something smaller? What would you tell him?
That's a good question. I would ask him, what is it that you're really trying to build? And do you need to learn Ruby on Rails and build a web application to actually build a very basic version of that thing?
I'll be a stand-in for Josh, but God, Ruby's so cool. I can use it in so many ways. I just need an excuse to learn Ruby.
Well, if that's true, Josh, then maybe you should build a small web app, but maybe it doesn't need to be ShareAppeal. Maybe it needs to be something even smaller, right? So rather than building a full-on web app with tons of APIs and that requires, a 2-sided market basically and all this stuff, why don't you just build a smaller little dinky app that you can share with somebody and play with, a toy app, instead of trying to build a social network?
Fair enough. Yeah. Last question. What are the, say, top 3 marketing lessons that you've learned across all these products?
Yeah, a big one is that it's hard to do marketing for stuff that you don't care about. I think there are people who are sort of marketing specialists that can just drop in any type of business and market it like crazy and do great with it. For me, I'm not that kind of person because I rely a lot on content marketing. So I think that you need to, that number one is pick just something you care about. If you don't care about it and you can't write a 5,000 word article on it, then, or a 10, 15-minute video where you explain something about it, that may be a bad sign.
Okay.
So that's number one. Number two is I think you have to find marketing channels that work for you. And different marketing channels work for different people. So some people will tell you have to do Instagram influencer ads, right? I don't think I would sell a single book if I did that. I mean, I might, right? But I can't think of an influencer on Instagram that would be worth my time and money to sell books. On the other hand, Quora is a great marketing channel for me. I haven't written an answer on Quora in months. And today I've gotten a few signups on my mailing list from Quora answers from a year and a half ago, right? So find a channel that works for you. And that means experimenting. I think 2 weeks to 30 days is a good window of time to experiment aggressively with a marketing channel. I did that with Pinterest. And I don't get any traffic from Pinterest, which shouldn't really surprise anyone, but I wanted to know. Twitter is okay. Quora is great. And over time, I built up SEO through Google Analytics. Podcast tours is a great marketing channel for me, right? But you have to try stuff. First, make sure you're interested. Second, experiment with a lot of channels. When you find a channel that works, go really hard on that channel and try to build it up and put a lot of energy in it. Don't feel like you have to try every marketing channel, or that you have to have 7 marketing channels, or that you have to do Facebook video because somebody said it's really great or whatever. You don't. Third thing for marketing. I don't know if I can come up with a third one. I think you kind of track attribution. Like if you can get a sense of where people are finding you from, if somebody comes to you and they buy your book out of the blue, right? So you can see in Google Analytics or whatever using to track analytics, like, wow, that person wasn't on my mailing list. I can't see where they were referred from. Email them and say, hey, thanks so much for buying my book. How did you find me, right? And figure out what marketing channel they use to find you. And usually it'll be like, oh, somebody recommended it to me or heard you on a podcast or whatever. So attribution is important. You don't want to go nuts on that. You can invest a lot of time in UTM tags and all this fancy stuff. But figure out where people, especially if they buy something from you, you need to know where they came from. It's important to know how they found you and bought it, because there's probably another 100 people that look like them out there that you could find.
Yeah, at $50 a book, that would make a difference.
Not bad if you can spend 10 minutes figuring out where they came from, right?
Yeah. Josh, I want to say thank you. Really generous of you to give of your time and your experience on this subject. Can you remind folks like how they could reach out to you if they have follow-up questions or what have you? Yeah,
absolutely. So the easiest way to find me is Twitter. I'm on Twitter constantly. I'm at Josh Doody, JOSHDOODY. The URL that I shared earlier is fearlesssalarynegotiation.com/DSMB. And on there is a link to my Twitter bio and I think my Facebook page and some ways that you can reach out, maybe even a contact form. So those are the easiest ways to get in touch with me.
Well, thanks again. Thanks to everybody who attended and had awesome questions. Really appreciate it. And I'm just going to hang up on you unceremoniously. We'll paste the recording to this on my website in a few days. And again, thanks everybody.
Thanks, guys. That was great. Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.